anyhow, I'm really looking forward to Ken's talk. There's a lot of talk on the mailing list about some of the subtleties of what the astrophotographers are doing, and they're talking about things, and I don't know what they are. And so Ken's going to talk a fair amount about the processing he uses, and so it'll give us all a little more insight in what it takes to do this.
Okay.
Ken Scheben.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys tonight. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of fun while we go through this. I know there aren't a ton of people who are doing astrophotography off of Long Island because it's not so easy. We have this little thing called light pollution here. So I'm hopefully give you some cheat codes on how you can get through that a little bit more effectively. First of all, before I get started, can you guys at home see that my screen here says photographing deep sky objects? Is that the screen that's up?
Yeah, that's what I say.
All right, good. Thank you. I've done a lot of presentations over the years for my job and in my corporate life. And one of the things that I learned very quickly is when you're going to build a presentation from scratch, think about your audience first, right? And so the first thing I thought about is a room full of people, most of whom like to use these funny little things at the end of the telescope. You seem to call them eyepieces. I don't understand exactly what they are and how they work, but the thought occurred to me that in the process of doing an hour-long talk on astrophotography, it's entirely possible I could put 50% of you to sleep. So I have come up with a plan B. If all goes to hell and you guys have fallen asleep and falling out of your chairs, we will make crazy balloon animals instead, okay? So I've got a plan B for you if it all goes south. Hopefully we don't get there. Yeah, that's true. All right. So if anyone wants to go home with a balloon dachshund, you should see me after the show. Okay. I'm not kidding. We can make these things. All right. I'm going to try and get through a little bit of stuff quickly here to make up some time. But I wanted to take you through a little bit about my background, how I got into photography. And of course, nothing is advancing. Yeah. Bear with me. Okay. Hopefully that works. And that's not going to work. All right. We'll go to plan B. We're good. Yep. So I've been doing photography for about 30 years. I got started into wildlife photography, and although that's not my equipment, I found this photo on the internet, and it looks exactly like what I own. And in fact, this crazy gigantic telescope over here, it's not a telescope, it's a bird lens. It's a Canon 500mm bird lens, and it's the first scope, so to speak, that I ever tried deep sky astrophotography on.
I have that.
Excellent lens. Fantastic bird lens, terrible deep sky astrophotography lens. All your stars look like the planet Saturn when you're done when you use this. But it got me started, and that's the idea. All right, you can shoot with what you've got until you get your skills to the point where you really go, maybe my equipment's holding me back. I should probably maybe make an investment here. But I've been doing both slide film, and I went to DSLRs pretty early on in the process with Canon.
That big lens have a filter block too?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does have a filter.
And what camera was that? The first DSLR? What was it called?
It's a thing called a D30.
Oh.
And I took, it was a 3.1 megapixel camera.
Wow.
And they laughed at me and said, you can't do anything with 3.1 megapixels. And you know what? You can do a lot with 3.1 megapixels if they're good pixels. So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but that's taken with that camera. It's a 3.1 megapixel shot taken across the river of the Delaware River. How did I get into astrophotography, though? Well, I worked a corporate job for 30 years until 2013. I was too young to really quit and fully retire. So I started an online watch business using the idea of taking high resolution photos to make the watch buying experience a little bit easier for people. And that worked great. My son joined the company, my wife joined the company, and we were going great guns for a while, and then everybody burnt out. So we closed it, and I started doing high-end real estate photography. There's a theme here, photography, right?
Yeah.
And I got my drone pilot license, and was going really well with this. And then, of course, we had this tiny little virus show up, and no one knew what to do, including me. But one thing was for sure, there was no one who wanted real estate photographers in their house at that time. So my job just stopped abruptly, and I had to figure out what the hell am I going to do with my time and all this camera equipment that I have and enjoy using. So I got the idea of trying to research astrophotography, and I found a YouTube channel from a guy he's a Canadian. His name is Trevor Jones, and he runs a YouTube channel. I'm sure some of you have seen it, called Astro Backyard. And Trevor, if you've seen him online, doesn't come across as a real high-tech astrophotography type of guy. He's a regular guy who just loved this hobby and got better and better at it. And he inspires people to give it a try, even though you may not know exactly how to do it. And he made it seem approachable. So I said, I'm going to give this a shot. And I did that. And unfortunately, I fell in love with it. And that's a problem. So I actually changed my address. This is my new current address. And I am so far down the rabbit hole. If you take your entire arm and shove it in the rabbit hole and put some shoulder into it, you still won't reach me. Okay, I am way down there. Every available night when I have the weather to do it, I will be trying to shoot some object up there in space. And when I sat down to put this together, I said, well, what is it that I do? Because there's a lot of different books you'll read, and people break down the hobby into different pieces. These are the things that came to mind to me. They're not from a textbook, but they're what I do. And there are 4 main steps, I think, in astrophotography. Target selection. Sounds like a piece of cake, right? What do I want to shoot? All right. If I want to shoot the Washington Monument, I just go shoot the Washington Monument. It's not that simple in astrophotography. There's a lot of things you have to think about. In fact, this is probably an hour-long conversation to really get into it. We'll touch base on this because it's that important, but I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. The equipment. Setting up your equipment, capturing your shots during the night. That's the easy part. Trying to figure out what equipment you're going to get to do this with, that is more of the hard part. All right, we'll talk very briefly about that because I want to save the time for the end of the process. The third step I felt was assessing and culling the data. Basically taking the bad stuff out that you shot that is not going to help your final photo, because either it helps or it hurts. There's nothing that's kind of neutral. And one of the things that I found out is that when I started throwing away a lot of the shots that I took and not using them, my photography got better quickly. So this is another very meaty topic because there's very good software that helps you figure out what to keep and what to throw away. All right, we don't have the time to go through all that tonight, but it's pretty important. And this last one is what we will spend the time on tonight. All right, stacking and editing. I think you'll all see this little black picture we have over here. And my hope is that by the end of tonight, you guys will all be able to think that you can produce an image like this guy over here on the bottom right, where you can have your own picture of Bigfoot walking along the edge of the Sol Nebula. Okay, we're going to spend a few minutes on target selection. That is a picture I took of the Ring Nebula. Don't ask me why I took it, because it is a tiny little speck in the middle of a giant sea of stars. And I really wanted to have a shot of the Ring Nebula, and I knew damn well it was going to be tiny. But I wanted to take it, and I took it anyway. But anyone in their right mind would look at this and say it's not a very compelling picture because there's not a lot to see there. That's the point of target selection. And the first consideration is field of view. How big is my object that I want to shoot in the frame of reference, okay? And the opposite exists as well. Many times you'll try and photograph something and find out it doesn't fit, it's too big in my field of view. Most of us start out with one telescope, one camera, that creates one size image area. And if what you're going to shoot doesn't fit in there, you have a problem, okay? So it's very important to know that. And not everything up there is tiny, okay, for the people who are beginning in this. I've shot objects that are 6 times the width of the full moon. So you don't always need tons of magnification to do this. But the really important part is how to do this. And the tool I would recommend is Telescopius. They have an app for iPhones. There may be one on for Androids, I'm not sure. But telescopius.com will work as well. You put in your camera. From the camera model, they know the size of your sensor. And if you also put in the lens or telescope you're going to use and the target you want to shoot, it'll actually show you how big your object will be in the frame of reference that you have on your equipment, okay? So do that, because finding a clear night is kind of hard around here sometimes, okay? And they're precious. So if you don't do this and you discover, I can't fit what I wanted to shoot in my camera, it won't fit in the frame, you just wasted a really important night, okay? More importantly is understanding something about the light for the target you want to shoot. This is absolutely critical, because if you get this wrong, you're probably going to fail on capturing something of an image. There are 5 things that we typically see when we look at deep sky objects. And although technically there's more than that up there that you could photograph, these are the ones you typically will find when you look at pictures online. And in no particular, well, I'll go from the bottom to the top. Star clusters, I think we all know what they are. Just a density of stars in a small area of the sky. They're beautiful to shoot. They're colorful. And they give off light in a full spectrum. So you shoot them with what we call broadband filters. That could be, if you're shooting with a camera that takes color photos, you're going to capture all the photos of that in one shot. You may use a light pollution filter, but it's what we call broadband photography, okay? Galaxies are no different. You may have 1 billion or more stars in a typical galaxy, and they give off light from across the whole spectrum. You're going to shoot them the same way you do star clusters. Dark nebulae. Maybe people don't know exactly what they are, but there are areas of dust up in the heavens that create some interesting shapes. Steve Bellavia shot one a couple of weeks ago. It was gorgeous. LDN 1622. It's called the Boogeyman Nebula. Okay, it's a scary-looking critter up there in the sky. It's really cool. But basically, they are reflecting light from the stars, so you shoot them with the same filters as you do star clusters and galaxies. Reflection nebula. These are gases that are up there in different targets, and they don't give off their own light. They reflect light from nearby stars. The one that I think most people think of is in Orion. It's the Witch Head Nebula. How many of you have seen pictures of the Witch Head? Okay, most of you. And this is lit up by a very bright blue star, Rigel, yes. And cool thing to shoot. Again, broadband photography, broadband filters, light pollution filters. And then we get to emission nebulae, and they're different. They don't behave the same way as the other targets we're going to shoot. And it's important that we're going to talk about that, because to me, that's the target that you want to shoot on Long Island. All right, well, and I'll explain why they're so important here, particularly. They're shot not with broadband filters, they're shot with narrowband filters. And I apologize for some of you who know this stuff already, but beginners may not know, so I'm going to cover it quickly. Narrowband filters are filters that allow a very small sliver of wavelength to pass through them. And they can do that because of what emission nebulae are. These are areas of gas, right? Typically hydrogen, sulfur, and oxygen that are located nearby a very special kind of star called a Wolf-Rayet star. And these stars give off radiation energy that's so intense that the radiation causes the atoms that make up these gas pockets to change quantum state. And when they drop down from, say, hydrogen goes from a third state to a second state, it gives off light. And it doesn't give off light across a broad spectrum. It gives off a very, very specific spectrum of light. Hydrogen, for example, will glow at 656 nanometers of wavelength, okay? And filter manufacturers, we have one in the room here, are smart people and figured out very quickly that, hey, if I've got something that's only emits light in one wavelength, well, I can make filters that block out everything on either side of that wavelength and only let this through. And you, by doing that, are eliminating virtually all the light pollution. You get a very crisp, very high contrast photo as a result of that, okay? And that's something that's really hard to do here on Long Island, shooting any other kind of target. Everybody understand what that's really important that we get that one. That's a big deal. So emission nebulae is my recommendation for how someone who's beginning to do astrophotography on Long Island starts. And that is probably different than what most people would tell you. They'll tell you start simple, shoot with whatever you can, target whatever you can, and you'll get something, but it probably won't be very good because of the light pollution. This stuff is all, these 4 target types are all really subject to light pollution. So emission nebulae and narrowband filters are the cheat code to shooting here. I've had conversations with friends where I bet them I could go to Times Square at midnight and take a really good narrowband photograph. I've never tested that, and I don't want to test it because I could be wrong. But I think I'm right based on the science. We'll see. All right, I'm going to go very quickly here on gear. And there's setting up your gear and using it. And then before that, of course, you have to acquire the gear to set up. And there's a lot of questions you have to answer to do this. I'm not even going to read all of these, but you've got stuff like how big a scope do I want? What kind of technology is in the scope? How much does it weigh? The weight of the scope determines how big a mount I need. What kind of mount do I want? What type of motor do I want in the mount? And you go on and on and on down here. Now, for someone who, I'm trying to get you guys inspired to try this, right? This, if we spend just time looking at this, could look like a showstopper going, I could never figure this out, all right? Remember, this is a one-time decision. You get your gear, you get started, okay? And there's lots of people in the club, me included, who will try and help you make decisions like this to avoid expensive mistakes, because this stuff isn't typically very cheap, okay? But it's doable. And then you get into the field and you go to capture your data. We call it data capture instead of taking pictures. I don't know why. It sounds more important. But you'll have to do a few things. There's a few skills you have to learn. Balancing your rig, polar alignment. You got to point your scope at Polaris, line it up at that. The North Star. It's got to have a starting point so it can track this night sky for you properly. You got to know how long your target shots, what we call subframes, are going to be. How many do you need? And the answer is always as many as I can get. Dithering. Dithering is something, it's a software capability you turn on in your imaging computer. And by the way, you're going to have an imaging computer because you can't do all this stuff by hitting the shutter button. So dithering, what it does in between each shot, it just moves your mount a few pixels at a time between shots. And what that does, it avoids a type of problem you're going to run into in processing called walking noise, which is impossible to get rid of. So it is kind of important. And then refocusing, because we're shooting at night. And what happens at night? It gets colder. And as metal tubes get colder, they contract and focus changes. So you're constantly battling, refocusing. You have to have some way of doing that. And whatever rig you set up will have its own way of doing that. But these are skills people acquire pretty quickly. It won't take you very long to get good at this.
Say the dithering again, what the reason for the dithering?
Yeah. Dithering, it just shifts the image around. You can usually choose how many pixels you want it to shift between shots. And if you stack, remember what we're going to do with these pictures, we're going to stack them on top of each other. And if you don't move them and you take a whole bunch of them in exactly the same spot, the noise gets stacked as well as the target data. And it
eliminates the noise?
It eliminates the noise, yes. Carl?
Well, it's not to kind of steal you thunder a little.
Yeah.
There's a thick pattern noise.
Yes, it is.
Every camera has like a little grid that comes out.
Yep.
Just by happenstance in these lenses, and by dithering smears it all out so you don't see it.
Exactly right. Walking noise, when you stack it and you see it, you can't miss it because it's ugly. It's very ugly. All right. Here's a picture of my rig. I have two telescopes, a tiny little one and a big one like this. And there's nothing magic about it. You need a mount, which is the white thing at the bottom. You need the telescope, which is the thing that looks like a telescope. You need a image train behind that, which leads down to a camera of some type. It could be a DSLR, mirrorless camera. I use a dedicated Astro camera, which has the ability to freeze the sensor. I shoot all my shots at -10 degrees centigrade because it keeps the noise down. I also have a filter wheel right in front of the camera. It's an 8-position wheel. You don't have to have a filter wheel. You can change your filters manually. It saves a lot of money. In front of that, you'll see the little red thing sticking up in the air, and that is another camera. Well, why the devil does he have two cameras on his rig? You can only take the picture with one of them. Well, actually, when you're tracking the night sky and you're going to take a very long exposure, these mounts do one thing. They try to null out the rotation of the Earth, okay? So they counteract that. But they do that with gears, right? The teeth meshing between the gears. And they're pretty good at it. But every set of gears is just slightly different. So over the period of a long number of seconds, you're going to start to drift a little bit from being on the exact same spot you started on at the beginning of your photo. And what people have come up with is if you use a second camera, just looks at the stars in the image. That's all it looks at, all it cares about, and it tracks them. And when the stars start to drift a little bit left to right, up or down, there's software in here that sends information to the map, your mount. It says, hey, mount, you're screwing up, you're going too slow, speed up, or you're going too fast, slow down. So even if you're drifting a pixel or two, that little tiny camera, and they're cheap, the whole setup is like $100, will correct it so you can track to the exact spot in the sky all night long.
There's a little prism in there that picks up the light?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways of guiding. What I'm describing is called guiding. And some rigs have a dedicated guide camera and a guide telescope that might ride on top. Mine does not. I have what's called an off-axis guider in my image train, and that houses that little red secondary camera. And it has a pickup prism that dips into the light coming down from the front of the telescope, and it sends that to my second camera, my guide camera.
Why would you want to have an off-guided camera versus the one on top that doesn't direct you?
Yeah, great question. The more magnification you have on your main telescope, the more magnification you need on your guide scope. If you have a tiny little guide scope with riding on top of something that's got a 2,000 millimeter focal length, you're going to need a pretty darn big guide scope. Usually you don't want to have less than a 1/3 ratio between a guide scope and your main scope. So you would need like a 700 millimeter guide scope, which is expensive. You're using another telescope as a guide scope. This one uses the magnification right from the telescope itself.
Plus, you don't have differential play.
Yes, there's a lot of reasons for it, but honestly, I'm going to ask us to hold off the hardware stuff because I'm going to run out of time on the demo, and I want you to have the demo. All right. I'm going to pass through this pretty quickly. But the only last point I want to make is a lot of the things you see in my mount they're convenience accessories. I don't have to have them to do imaging. Okay. I have a Wi-Fi extender on the top here. I don't have to have that. I just get closer to my mount. I have a port extender and power distribution box up here. I don't have to have that. I can put power to my system other ways. I do have to have an imaging computer. And this little red box, it's about this big, runs my entire night, runs all my imaging all night long. Tells me what target I'm going to go at. It'll center that target for me. It will keep me tracked on it. It manages my guiding. It manages changing of filters. It manages how long the shots are going to be. It does everything, okay? And once you set it up, go to bed. See what you get in the morning.
Hey, just set it up like that.
15 minutes. Well, how long does it take a night to set it up? Yeah, I married an angel. She lets me keep my telescope in my dining room. And I open my sliding door onto my back deck. I image off my back deck most nights. And I drag this thing out and I carry it over to the corner of the deck. And that takes me a couple minutes to do that. And then setting up the power for it. No, everything's pretty connected. I've got it wired in such a way that I have one wire from the ground going up to this. Everything else is in the air already.
What about polar alignment?
Polar alignment I have to do every night because I drag it. ASIR does it for me. You know, it tells me where I am. I know where the North Star is from the deck. I've done it. I've done it 500 times. I know right where it is. So I'm usually within half a degree. ASIR. I'm sorry. The imaging computer. This guy down here. Yeah, yeah. That does. It has a polar alignment feature in the software. Yep. Okay. Assessing and culling the data. You know, we talked a little bit about this in the start of the things, but sometimes less is more, right? It's not always intuitive, but throwing out some of your shots, although you worked hard to get them and it took a lot of time to set up and it's cold at the beach when you went down there to shoot, sometimes you got to get rid of the bad guys. And you know, you could be banging away at HA subframes and you see the first three come in, you go, this is going to be beautiful. You get a whole night's worth of them. And you go, I am well on my way to creating my first Mona Lisa version of a deep sky photograph. And then you stack them up, you open the shot up, it's full frame on your screen, and you go, oh, Mona Lisa's got some problems, okay? It happens more times than it should, all right? But why does that happen? Well, there's a lot of things that can happen to degrade an individual shot, one individual frame you take of a target. Wind is a nightmare. Sometimes you'll open up a subframe and you go, all the stars are double. There's two of all of them. All right, you had a gust of wind come through and knock your scope off slightly. Throw it out. Can't do anything with it. Planes coming through. Throw them out. Can't do anything with it. You cannot save them. Satellites, sometimes you can save. Many times you can save them. I do not throw out my satellite shots unless they're really, really bad. High thin clouds are the worst thing that can happen. You'll be going through, taking shots, and you know, one shot, you've got 7,000 stars in the frame. And the very next shot you take, you got 300 stars. What happened? A high thin cloud came through and you know, obscured tons and tons of details in that image. It's going to hurt your final picture. Throw it out. Atmospheric extinction. We get greedy. We set up this rig. It's some work. We get it running. Everything's running perfectly. We're tracking a target, and the target goes all the way down here. Now I'm shooting through the entire atmosphere, and the shot looks terrible. You got to give up at some point when it gets too low. And vibrations, you know, a truck goes by, an 18-wheeler through the street will screw you up. And then cable drag. I haven't had a lot of problems with this myself, but I know people who have had some of the cables as the scope rotates wrap around a knob someplace and literally rip a USB port out of their imaging computer. It happens. It will ruin your night, I promise you. But This is what you go through to assess and cull the data and get rid of it. All right, the fun stuff. This is the stacking and editing. This is where the magic happens. And I chose to focus on this because this is what everybody seems to be the most afraid of doing in deep sky photography. It keeps more people away from the hobby, I think, than anything else. Why do we stack? Well, sorry. They'll tell you, the textbooks will tell you, well, stacking increases the signal to noise ratio, and that is true. But what the hell does that mean? You know, I can give you a number for a signal noise ratio on a single subframe, and I can give it to you on a stacked image. And they're very different, but they're still just numbers. So I'm going to show you with your eyes how these things work. A single 5-minute subframe shooting hydrogen alpha from my backyard last fall. I shot 2 targets here. One at the top of the frame is called the Flaming Star Nebula, and the one at the bottom of the frame is called the Tadpoles Nebula. And we're going to process this together, okay, to make a finished, beautiful, full-color image. And if you look at this 5-minute sub-exposure, a couple things come to mind. There is a fair amount of detail in there, but it's obscured to a great degree by noise, all right? And why is there noise in a 5-minute photo? I mean, 5 minutes is a pretty long photo. Ken, you're a photographer for a long, long time. You ever take a 5-minute photo? You'd have a
film, but not
no. It's you'd have an awful lot of detail if it's not pure white, right? But you think about what we're doing here. We're taking pictures of an object that's maybe 2,000 light years away. Okay, it's not a bright object. It is extremely dim. There's only 1 or 2 nebulae in the entire night sky you can even see with your naked eye. Maybe you can make an argument you can see Orion, okay? But it's hard. Most of these things are too dim to see. So there's very few photons of light coming down from this target. It's going through the Earth's atmosphere, down into your telescope. It's got to pass through your imaging train and then hit your sensor, and you got to be lucky enough that your sensor recognizes it as light. All those things have to go right. And in 5 minutes, you don't get a whole lot of those photons that come down. So a 5-minute blank photograph with no image, just you threw a blanket on the rig and took a 5-minute image, it'd be really noisy like this. And you don't have enough signal in 5 minutes to overwhelm the noise. But we have a trick, and it's called stacking. It's taking a whole bunch of, in my case, 5-minute shots for this object, and it will overwhelm the noise. I've never seen this presented this way. I hope this works for you. But that's what one shot looks like in 5 minutes. I shot 82 of these, okay? 82 5-minute exposures. And I culled out a bunch of them. I only kept 64, and I stacked them up. And this is what one shot looks like. This is what 64 of them look like, stacked.
Oh, man.
And when first time I saw this, processing this stuff, I went, that's magic.
Wow.
It felt like magic to me, okay? It blew my mind. Again, that's 1, and that is 64. And I don't care what the signal noise ratio is, okay? Because I can work with this. I can make a beautiful image out of this. I can't do it with the 1 subframe.
So did you do this with the small refractor?
This was shot through a Red Cat 51, a sub $1,000 telescope, which is one of the best pieces of optics I've ever seen. It is a fantastically good piece of gear.
And what's the focal ratio?
That is I believe it's a 4.9, just from memory, which is a medium speed. It's not super fast. It's certainly not super slow. But that is the power of stacking, and that's why we do it. That's why we take as many subframes as we can.
And does that include shooting a dark frame or dark frames?
We're going to come to the dark frames. Hold that thought. I'm going to cover it. It's the last boring part of the presentation.
Got a lot of songs in it.
Oh yeah, tons of them.
No filter or?
That is an HA filter. That's HA. I shot on this target. You'll see the images. I shot HA, I shot O3, and I shot S2. Nope, I shoot monochrome. So I'm shooting black and white pictures, and I'm putting just 3 elemental filters in front, one at a time. Okay. I'm going to look at the top of that image, and this is the flaming star part of the nebula. And this is where you'll really see the noise. And I think the guys at home will see it better on this. It may wash out a little bit over the Zoom transmission, but it looks like somebody dropped a salt and pepper shaker on this, right? Believe it or not, there's a ton of detail in there. This is 64 stacked images
Wow,
instead of the one.
that's magic.
It is magic. It is absolutely magic. And it's one of the reasons I love this hobby. It just like, wow. I mean, you see the all the detail in all the contours around where the gases are, and it's beautiful. And this is the bottom of the frame, the Tadpoles Nebula. And they're in there. You can see that both tadpoles in a single frame, but here's 64 of them stacked. Okay? And by the way, my wife does not believe they look like tadpoles. She says they look like something else. But this is a family show, and we're going to leave it there. Okay?
And that noise that we're looking at,
Yeah.
are those dimmer stars then? Or is that?
No, that is electronic noise.
It is.
Yes. And when we talk about calibration, I'll show you the noise.
Got it.
So a quick word on stacking here. When you stack them, do you just stack the light frames? No. You need to put calibration frames in there, and you have to take them first, of course, to make these as good as possible. You do in your stack include the light frames, the photos of the target that you took, but you're also going to put calibration frames in there. And there are basically three types. One is called darks, one's called flats, one is called bias. There are other ways to do it, but that's basically what most people start out doing. And we'll talk about the darks and flats at least in a little bit of detail. I'll show you examples of both. And the stacking software, what do we stack with? All right, there are a lot of choices you can make. I use a software package, and you're going to see it in just a minute, called PixInsight. It's not just a stacking software, it's end-to-end processing. It does everything in astrophotography. It's probably the premier tool to use in astrophotography these days. They process the Hubble images in PixInsight, okay? So NASA seems to like it. So most of the top astrophotographers in the world use PixInsight to process their work. It is not cheap. You buy it from a gentleman over in Spain, Juan Canero. It's 300 euros, which is about $312 US. Again, it's certainly not a giveaway. But let me give you a comparison. How many people use Photoshop in here or Lightroom? Lightroom. For Adobe, this January started charging for a package of Photoshop and Lightroom. And you can't buy it anymore, right? It's a subscription-only product. And their combo of Lightroom and Photoshop, they call it the photographer's package. And it's now $20 a month. So, and you can't own it. You just rent it, essentially. It's subscriptions. So for $240 a year, you get to rent Photoshop and Lightroom, and compare that to the $300 and you own it forever. And it's constantly upgraded. Every year you get 2 or 3 really major upgrades. It's really, I'm very, very pleased with the purchase. It's worth the money. But if you're not sure you want to go all in on this, if your arm is not all the way down that rabbit hole, Deep Sky Stacker is an easy way to get into it. Deep Sky Stacker is Windows-only software, but it's free. You can download it, just Google it. It's easy to find. It works. It does a pretty decent job at stacking. It's not quite as good as PixInsight, but you can get a quality image at a Deep Sky Stacker if you just want to explore this. There's another product called Cyril. A lot of guys use it. I think, Steve, you're a Cyril user, right? What do you think of it? For the price, you can't go wrong. Yeah. Yeah. It's probably not as good as PixInsight, but it has a lot of content, and there's a big upgrade, I understand, coming out soon. It's supposed to make it a lot better.
I don't want to take away from the time too much, but we were up in the Adirondack. There was a class that I took. They were using PixInsight.
Yeah.
And I couldn't follow it. But I understood Cyril, so I had the guy come over and say, okay, what do you do in PixInsight, and how do I map that over to what Cyril does.
Right.
And they were showing him all the sliders in Cyril, and says, pick some type.
Yeah.
And he was thinking maybe that's gonna help teach Cyril. And they're supposed to be coming up with a big upgrade. Anyway.
All right.
but
It, there's choices here. And as Steve said, you can't beat the price. Astropixel processor is another European product. It's about half the price. What's that?
Just stack them.
Yeah. I heard this is a really good stacking solution. Really good. Yeah. Good stuff. And there's one called Sequitur. I've used it, but it's really built for nightscape images. What's a nightscape image? You go out to Utah, you shoot the arches, but you have the Milky Way above it. Well, you want to block out part of the ground so when you stack the stars, it doesn't include the ground piece. That's what Sequitur is really good at. All right, calibration frames. There are things called dark frames, and they profile the sensor noise that your camera has. You take these with the lens cap on the camera, or you throw a blanket over it. Somehow you make it dark, and you take them with no light. The key is you have to take these at the same length of time as you take your subframes. So if you're shooting hydrogen alpha shots for 5 minutes, you need 5 minute subframes of darks as well. Got to be the same amount of time. Otherwise, they don't work. I'm going to show you that. You will see some amp glow in a second. Here's a key one. You got to take them at the same temperature as your main shots. So if you're banging away at 3 a.m. on taking shots of your target, and you haven't taken darks yet, and you have a DSLR that's not a cooled camera, you have to stay up later and take all your dark frames that night, because tomorrow in the afternoon, you will not be at that temperature that you were at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Will the noise be the same at the same temperature every time using the same?
The average of it will be. Yeah.
Temperature of the camera.
Well, the ambient temperature is going to impact the temperature of the camera. And so it's an approximation. It's the best you can do without a cooled camera. It's one of the reasons that people buy dedicated Astro cameras that are cooled, because if I took my shots at 3 in the morning and I had it cooled down to -10°C and I want to go to bed, I go to bed, because at noon the next day, I can still take it back down to -10°C. Okay?
And with an uncooled camera.
Yeah.
Also, as you take more photos, your light frames aren't all at the same temperature.
That's
So-
true.
So dark frames become a real challenge.
There's a range. Yeah, you try and get as close as you can. And you don't take just one. You got to take 15 to 30 of these things, because they too get stacked. All right? So think about, you're taking 5 minute subframes. How long does it take you to take a dozen? That's an hour. Okay? So you got to plan for that.
I guess it's worth mentioning that with the newer generations of sensors, you don't take dark frames anymore.
We're going to come to that. I still have to take dark frames. Where am I? There we go. All right. And when you stack them, the stacking software creates a master dark frame, and that gets subtracted from the light frames. All right. It does two main things. It takes out stuck pixels. If anybody's ever seen a camera sensor, really looked at the details in there, for long exposure photos, there are bright pixels all over the place that are always in the same spot. They're stuck, and you get more and more of them as the sensor ages. It will remove those. So these darks are good typically for about 3 months, then you got to reshoot them. Okay? It also removes something called sensor glow. And not every camera has sensor glow, but mine does. All right, and I'll show you that in a second here. That is a dark frame. That is a 5 minute dark frame taken on a ZWO ASI 294mm Pro camera at -10°C. And it looks like there's a little man standing on the side of the frame with a flashlight, right? That's bad enough that it's over on the right side. It's also, you can't see it very well here, it's also over on the left side. And that comes from electronics that are located in the camera a little bit too close to the sensor, and they bleed energy that's picked up by the sensor as light. Really new sensor technology avoids this. You don't have to have it. It's not a bad idea to take darks, just to have them. But I have to take them because when I stack, gotta remember every shot I take, that image is embedded in every single 5-minute subframe that I take. So when I stack 64 of those, you cannot take that out in post-processing. It is embedded in every shot.
I'll also say, is there also, darks also remove that walking noise that you can see clearly in your image?
Oh, yeah. Yep. Well, some of that is, yeah, I do have that in here, but on my display at home, I don't see it. It's a bit of an aberration with this particular screen.
Also, did they get rid of the stuff pixels along with the walking thing?
Walking, you're not going to get rid of all the walking noise by doing, you still have to dither. You still, yeah.
Did their stuff pixels?
Yeah, that certainly will help. That certainly will help. Calibration frames, flats, okay? Now this is the opposite of darks, which is all about the sensor. Flats are all about your image train, the light coming down, going through your telescope. And it's looking for problems with that it can try and help correct in your final image. And we're really looking for dust spots. We call them dust motes, okay? And you may think, well, my rig is clean. No, your rig is probably not clean. Take some flats and you'll discover what you have. It also helps in light trail off. If you've got a really large full frame sensor and a really narrow light circle that your rig creates, you may not get full illumination all the way to the edge of the sensor. And flats will correct that for you. It's called vignetting. You take these with a flat panel. Typically, we tell our rig to point to the zenith straight up, and we put a flat panel. A lot of people use illuminated tracing panels on top of the rig, and they work pretty well. Some people will put a white t-shirt over the top of the rig, put a rubber band around it and stretch it, make sure there's no wrinkles in it. And you take them without any separate illumination, but you do them at dawn, or you do them right before, at dusk, right before you start imaging. And they work pretty well. But you got to take them. These are the most important calibration frames, more important than the darks. And you take 15 to 30 of them. You try and get them for about 2 seconds. And you have to take one set of these for every filter you shoot through. So if you shoot with a black and white camera like I do, I have that. If I shoot red, green, and blue filters, I need one for red. I need one for green. I need one for blue. You just keep on adding on. But they're worth it. This is an example of what a flat looks like. This is from my Red Cat. And there was clearly a dust spot right on the sensor in the lower right-hand corner. And when you stack 64 of those, it looks like a black hole. Okay, you found a black hole. You were the second ones to photograph a black hole. This is the worst flat I ever took, and I took it last week. I very quickly had reconfigured my rig, and I must have had it exposed to some dust. And I wasn't actually sure when I shot these flats whether this was dust or perhaps I got attacked by the tentacle of a giant squid down at the beach. But something went very wrong. I got a lot of dust donuts in there.
Sensor,
What's that?
a walking sensor, or
Yeah, I use a camel hair brush if I can't. If it doesn't blow off, I very gently you try and guide it off. But you got to get it off somehow.
I come to work, I have nitrogen gas, we don't want to blow it
All right. Okay. So you've done all this work to create your calibration frames. You've spent all night shooting beautiful narrowband shots. You are excited as hell. You process your stacked image in PixInsight or something else, and it's been chunking away for an hour. And finally, it kicks out your stacked final image, and you open it, and you're excited, and you get that. Okay, and that's the beginning. That's what you get every single time when you stack them. They always look like this. So I affectionately call this the black blob, but it's normal. Don't panic. It's what everybody starts out with. It's what we call an unstretched linear image, and we'll talk a little bit about what's in there. But it's our job to stretch that and turn that into something that looks like a photograph. There is a function in PixInsight called an auto stretch or a screen stretch. I can hit one button and it will look inside that black blob and figure out using algorithms what are the brightest available data and what's the darkest available data, and it actually turns that black blob into something that looks like a photograph, okay? And that's a second piece of magic we'll go through tonight. So here is the black blob, and I hit one button on my processing software, and it becomes this. All right, that's what's hidden inside. And you'll see some stacking artifacts. You got black on the bottom, and you've got black up the right side, and that's just some stacking because you're dithering, you're moving it around, and you're going to get things like that. You just crop that out. All right. So what's going on inside the black blob? The best way to explain that, and it's important we know what's happening here, is that we look at something called a histogram. How many of you know basically what a histogram is? Just about. So I'm not even going to spend time on here. I was going to show you a picture of Cherry Springs. I built a histogram for it, but we don't really need to go through that. This is the histogram of the black blob.
Wow.
And you know, for those who don't know histograms well, it's basically a count of how many pixels are available in a photograph from the darkest areas to the brightest areas. The darkest all the way on the left, the brightest all the way on the right. And you see a very, very unusual histogram here because it's a straight line along the y-axis. Everything is jammed into the first 1% of that histogram, okay? So it's in there, the data is in there. All those faint photons have been captured, but it's our job to take this jammed up mess and stretch it into something that looks like the full dynamic range of a normal photograph. And in the past, that was really hard to do. With the software we have now, it's pretty easy. All right, last slide before we do a demo. All right, I'm going to give you a basic recipe for narrowband editing, okay? And it's going to be very general. As you get to do this on your own, you can start to tweak off of this. Like any good chef is going to give you a recipe, but the best chefs are going to taste along the way. They're going to use the taste buds to guide them a little bit. We're going to use our eyes to flex off of a recipe, okay? And our eyes will tell us what we need to do. But for starters, for each filter that you shot through, we're going to stack all those light frames and calibration frames. So we do that for HA, we're going to do it for O3, and we're going to do it for S2. And then we're going to do something called deconvolving the image. And again, one thing I hate about this hobby is the language, right? It's like they want to keep people away from it by using big words. Deconvolve is when you shoot through air, you know, the air makes things wobble, and that makes it blurrier. Well, very smart people have figured out some algorithms that attempt to deconvolve that or undo the blurriness caused by shooting through the atmosphere. That's all this is. It's a type of sharpening, but don't go into Photoshop or Topaz and try and sharpen it like that. This is different, but it essentially makes the image sharper. So we're gonna sharpen each of those filter files. And then the last really big piece here we're going to do to each of those filter files is we're going to unscreen or remove the stars. Now, why the devil will we take the stars out of a photograph of a deep sky object? Well, we're going to stretch that. You saw that little spiky histogram? We're going to stretch the bejesus out of that image. And when we stretch stars really hard, they tend to get pretty wonky. They don't look very good. So we're going to process them separately and then put them back into the image at the end. Okay, it sounds way harder than it is. And you're going to do it, so you're going to see this today. So we're going to combine, when we're done with each filter, we combine the 3 filters into an RGB image. And the topic on this is, how do we do that? Because, you know, hydrogen alpha doesn't have a natural color for R or G or B. What should we assign it to? We don't know which color channel to put it in. Well, NASA, when it started doing the Hubble, they decided to use a palette called SHO. And the way we assign these is what's called the palette that we use. That's the terminology. But there's nothing that actually forces us to use SHO. SHO means we put sulfur in red, we put hydrogen in the green channel, we put oxygen in the blue channel. But there's a lot of other combinations that are possible. How do we know which one to use? I'm going to show you in the demo. When we combine them, we're going to see a full color picture of our target. It may not be perfect. We have to tweak it. Many times, the background, the deep sky itself, which is supposed to be what color?
Black.
Dark, dark gray. It's not black, it's very dark gray. But you may open up your picture and the deep sky is pink, purple, green, blue, something you don't want it to be. So we're going to do some work to neutralize that background. There's a lot of different ways to do that. I'll show you one of the ways here today. What did I just do? Okay. And then we're going to do a permanent stretch on our starless deep sky object image. Okay. Now, I just told you I could hit one button and stretch it. You could see what's in there. That's what we call a screen stretch. It's temporary. It's just a view into what is hidden in that photo. If we open that file up a week from now, it's still going to be a black blob because we haven't done anything permanently to it. Now we're going to do something permanent. We're going to change this file so that if we open it up in the future, you're going to see the full dynamic range of the picture. We're going to use color mask and curves to adjust the colors and contrast. And I could explain that with words, but it's much better in the demo. And then we're going to run noise reduction if we have a noisy image. Okay, we may not. There's other ways to deal with noise. I'm going to show you one today. We're not going to do noise reduction, but we don't have to. Now, at this point, if I've done anything correctly, I've got a really beautiful starless deep sky image. We are missing one thing, though, the stars. So remember when we took the stars out in the move up top there, unscreening, we ended up with files for each of the stars. We're now going to combine those three sets of star images to create a colored star image. And then we're going to add that back into the starless image. And then we're done. We've got hopefully a perfect sounds easy, right?
Yeah, it's not a big deal.
Sounds easy. You tell me if you think it's hard. When I have to sit and put the glasses on for this one, guys. I apologize. I'm not as young as I used to be. All right. Now, if this goes correctly here, you will see PixInsight, and if this goes correct, we will process this image from stacked images to finished product in 15 minutes. And then you can all go home and sleep. All right. Guys at home, tell me if you are seeing PixInsight screen here.
Yes, I see it.
All right, thank you. All right,
Not seeing it.
you're not seeing it. That's not good. All right, you're all gonna have to go home and watch it there. That is interesting. Why isn't that showing up?
Mirror the screen.
Oh, I think you have to share
I shared
your
it.
screen and then go to the desktop.
Are you all done with the slideshow?
Almost. I'm gonna go back.
It's working perfectly from home.
Yeah, but they don't have it here in the room. I'll be right with you. This won't take long.
Mirror instead of.
Duplicate? Okay. Boom. Thank
Yay.
you. Thank you. It's my first Zoom presentation. You guys still have PixInsight at home?
Yes.
Good. All right. So I'm going to start out. I'm going to show you the starless image of HA. Okay. What I did is I ran something. I'm going to skip a couple steps that just take time to run, and we don't really want to watch a circle spin here. So this process here in PixInsight, by the way, the right side of the screen are processes that I normally use frequently, so they're available to me. Not everybody sets up their desktop like this. We also have a list of processes here, and I'm not going to attempt to go through this, but you can see the number of tools you have available dedicated to doing something to an astrophoto. It's really, really powerful. But the thing I like the most about PixInsight, especially over the last 6 months, it's open to other programmers doing things and creating scripts that make a program that is not particularly visual, very visual, and very easy to use relative to the way it has been before. And you'll tell me if you think that's a true statement by the end here. Okay, so if I had the full starred image here, I would be just dragging this little triangle over to it. I drop it on there, and it would run for about 90 seconds, and I would have 2 images. I'd have a starless one, and I'd have a starred one. And these are the 2 I got by doing that, okay? And you'll see that the image from hydrogen is really detailed. There's a lot of information in here. And it's pretty smooth. There isn't a lot of noise in there. And that's what you get from shooting enough photos. If you don't want to run noise reduction, there's been a lot of discussion about that. Don't run it. Take more photos. It will really eliminate the noise for you. But of course, we didn't shoot just hydrogen, right? We shot oxygen, and that's what the oxygen filter stack gave us. And this is you'll notice that oxygen was only present in the area around the Tadpoles Nebula, okay? Now, oxygen in a deep sky image is usually shown as blue. So remember that as we get to the final image, we're going to look for blue in the tadpoles. And the last piece here was sulfur. Now, sulfur is different than oxygen. Instead of being just in one spot, it's everywhere. But it's a really faint signal. So when we stretched it to see all the details, it's pretty darn noisy. Okay, so we know right now, when I combine these 3 images, I'm going to have a fair amount of noise in it because sulfur is noisy. We're not going to worry about it right now. We'll show you how we deal with that. Okay, now we're going to, as soon as we get the starless images, which we now have, we're going to try and combine them. But we don't know what kind of palette to use, right? We talked about SHO, but there are certainly other choices. A really smart guy in a company called SETI Astro wrote a script called Perfect Palette Picker. Say that 3 times fast. And this is what Perfect Palette Picker does. You'll notice before I run anything here, there are letters in each of these little black boxes. And these are different combinations or mappings of hydrogen, sulfur, and oxygen into different palettes, okay? So in the past, if I wanted to explore what different combinations would look good, I would have to do that one by one, and it takes a long time to build that. Now, I'll show you how hard it is. I have to tell it where my HA shot is, where my starless 03 shot is, where is, and my S2, and that's it. Now I hit create, yeah.
Photos, already stretched them?
They're stretched.
Okay.
They are stretched. I just saved the time stretching them. And there's another script to stretch them. It's really pretty easy these days. Now, clearly.
Stretched all 3 by varying amounts.
Yeah, yes, I did. But it's not as critical. This can stretch it for you. You don't have to stretch them in advance. I just happen to have done it. I actually went back to build this presentation out of data that I worked on last fall. So they were stretched already. Now, I've clearly got different colors in here, right, on all these different palettes. And I can't really see across the whole field. So I'm going to hit the little button that says zoom out. And now I can see what the color image would look like for all these different combinations. And I'm looking for certain things here. When we show hydrogen, we typically show it as a red to burnt orange color. That's the standard in narrowband photography. And in oxygen, we're trying to show that in blue. Those are the 2 most important things. If I look at the Hubble palette, SHO, which is the first one, I definitely have blue in the tadpoles, which is great. The only problem is I took our strongest signal, which is hydrogen, and I mapped it into the green channel. SH is green, right? And that gives me a predominantly green picture. Hydrogen is green. And in the past, when I started, I would build this and I would work several different things I'd have to do to turn the green into red or orange. We don't have to do that anymore. If I go down and look through all these palettes, the one on the bottom right is actually really darn close to what I want to end up with. Okay, it's got the burnt orange look in hydrogen, and it's got blue in the tadpoles. So it's called the 4-ax palette, which is a little mathematical game that's played in something called pixel math that mixes the channels together in different combinations. Don't worry about it. It's all done in the background. All you have to do is see the picture and pick the one that you like the best.
What is HSS?
HSS is hydrogen in the red channel, sulfur in the green channel, and sulfur in the blue channel. That would be for a target, Ken, that if it doesn't have any signal at all in oxygen.
Oh,
Okay. HOO is another 2-element palette that's very popular. A lot of really nice pictures in the HOO palette as well. They just don't have any sulfur in them. Okay. So by simply clicking on the 4-ax palette that I want, watch how hard this is. I went click, and I'm going to close down the script. I now have a full color process image, the beginning of one. Okay. And it does have the blue that I want in the tadpoles, and it does have the orange red that I want in hydrogen. But now I use my eyes to kind of look around and say, what do we have to work on here? Well, again, the deep sky, the areas that not part of this target, should be gray, all right? They're not. They're kind of light blue or cyan, actually. So ideally, I'd like to find a way to just work on and select just the cyan parts of this image and delete it or desaturate it or get rid of the blue somehow. How hard is that to do? Well, there's a new script out called Color Mask. And the way this works, it's very visual. I select the main color I'm trying to work on with the image. In this case, it's cyan. Okay, and I get a pie slice that gives me the beginning of working with cyan. I want to modify a little bit because this pie slice goes a little to the green. I don't really want any green. So I'm going to slide the upper slider up, and I'm also going to go into the deeper blues. Okay, and when I'm happy with that, I hit OK. And I'm going to get something called a mask. Masks are in black and white. And masks do something really special. They protect parts of the image from being manipulated, and they allow other areas of the image to be manipulated. You see the black here, the big black blob that matches up perfectly with where the flaming star nebula is, right? That will protect that because it has no blue in it. It will protect it from being changed when I try and get rid of the blues. And also you see the orange is streaming out the left side of the frame in the color image, perfectly protected by this mask. So this is a good mask. It does have one problem though. Anybody know what that problem is?
It has the important information that you want.
Yeah, the Tadpoles Nebula also happens to be cyan, okay? And if I use this mask, which we got white over here where the tadpoles are, it's going to remove the blue from the tadpoles, and I don't want that. So I have manipulated this mask a little bit. I'm not going to, it would take me about 30 seconds to show it to you, but I'm going to let you trust me that it didn't take very long to change that mask. I masked the mask, yes. And you now will see a black blob right over the tadpoles. So to put this mask into effect, I have to do one specific action. I have to take the name tag on the file right here and drag it over just below the name of my color image that I want to work on. And it lights up in red, so I know it worked correctly. If I hit Control K, I take off the visibility of the mask, but it's still active. Now, the only command that I know in PixInsight that lets me change colors is something called curves transformation. It does a lot of different things. It's very powerful. And I'm going to hit this little circle, which creates a real-time preview. And I'm also going to select from the different options on this tool, the one all the way on the right that says S. S stands for saturation. And if I drag this curve up, it makes whatever is unmasked more saturated. So my blues get bluer, all right? Everybody can see that how the blues got really bluer? But I don't want to go that way. I want to go the opposite way. I want to drag it down and take the blue out of it. And I'm going to execute that or add it, make that happen. I'm going to hit it 3, 4, 5 times until I'm comfortable. I got all the cyan out of the sky. Okay, all the background of the sky. Nothing crazy. I'm just applying the mask that I've already built. I'm going to close the preview. And now I look at my picture. I no longer have cyan all over the background of the image. I have my target, and the background behind that target is clean. Okay. I'm going to remove the mask because I'd like to make this a little bit more contrasty. And again, curves transformation. Instead of saturation this time, I'm going to work with brightness, and I'm going to make the sky background darker, and I'm going to make the actual nebula a little brighter so I can see them better. Okay, and that's close enough. That's pretty close. I am working this image in a way that basically just gives me the colors that I want. If I'm really honest about it, if I look in here, it's pretty darn noisy. It's not going to make a pretty finished image, right? But that's okay. I only want the colors from this image. I don't want anything but the colors. Why? Because I have a starless hydrogen image that has all the details that I could ever want. And we're going to use this hydrogen image to give me the details by combining it with the colors from this image. Okay, that's the concept. To prepare that to happen, I got to do one thing. I don't want to mix a noisy image in with details, so I'm going to blur this. And I'm going to do something called convolution. We already talked about how stupid that language is. But I'm going to, you do it until you blur it with these sliders until you can't really see the grain in it anymore. And then you hit go. And now you have a blurry mesh color image, but the right colors. So all we have to do now is somehow get hydrogen together with this color image. And fortunately, PixInsight gives us a really easy way to do that. There's a process called LRGB combination. That's a luminance. It's built to do broadband imaging, actually, but we trick it. And we drag hydrogen into the luminance channel. We turn off R, G, and B. You can give it its own files to provide red, green, and blue, but we already have red, green, and blue in the image we just worked on. So we're not going to use any other files. And the last thing I do is I drag this little triangle on top, and I should get the colors combining with the details of the hydrogen filter. And if you have one strong signal filter, I don't care how grainy it is, your color images,
Wow.
you can get an absolutely gorgeous finished image. Take a look
Wow.
at what this is. All right. I don't know too many people who wouldn't be proud to put their name on that and say to friends and family, look what I did. All right.
Wow.
It's a pretty high quality image, and it really wasn't that hard. Does anybody see anything I did that was really crazy difficult? Not really.
Finding the menus.
Finding the menu, everything's got a learning curve. You
Yeah.
got to learn your way around a little bit. They can't fix that.
Learning curve.
Okay. But you know, there's a million processes. But if you learn 4 or 5 scripts, because I did most of this with scripts, I didn't use very many of the processes in PixInsight. And those are the things that are not very visual. The scripts are all visual. You can see what's going on. If I wanted to prepare this to, you know, just final touches, there's about 30 other things I could do, but it is good enough, right? I increased my contrast a little bit. I might want to add some chrominance to this just to pop a little bit more color in here, but I don't want to go too crazy. We're going to go keep the edit light. Now, this is almost a finished image, right? What is it missing? Stars. All right, so I want to add RGB stars in here. There's only one problem with that. we didn't shoot RGB stars. We didn't shoot red, green, and blue filters. We only shot narrowband filters. So I've got sulfur stars, oxygen stars, and hydrogen stars. What can I do with that? Well, fortunately, there's another really smart script that we can use, okay? Also from SETI Astro, and this one's another one almost like magic. This is called narrowband to RGB star combination, and it gets awful close to really true star colors. And all I have to do is say, what are the names of my star images? I got HA stars, I have O3 stars, and I have S2 stars. I'm going to apply star stretch because these are not stretched yet. And I'm going to show a preview by checking that box. And it's going to chug away for about 10 seconds. It's going to combine all 3 channels. And then I'm going to stretch this preview. And if you look around here, that looks for all the world like natural red, green, and excuse me, it's got yellow stars, it's got blue stars, it's got white stars. They look extremely natural. I'm going to hit execute because I'm happy with it. And now it's done. And I end up with an actual star image that's going to somehow merge in with my starless image. To get these two together, we're down to our last step. Is another script, surprise, surprise, very visual. It's called Image Blend. This is by Adam Block, who built this, a fantastic imager. It's let you take 2 files and merge them together. And the first one is named Final 4X, and the last one is named NB to RGB stars 1. That's the one we just made. And it's going to replace the first one with the second one, but instead of replacing, I'm going to change the blend modes to screen, and it screens those stars right back in to the color image. And the reason I like this script is when we're doing narrowband imaging, really the nebula is the star of the show. Many times, if you get a very dense star field, they can almost overwhelm the nebula. So you can use a slider down here called the midtone slider on the star image. If I want to reduce that, I can slide it to the right and my stars get smaller. They're all there, but they get a little less emphasis, okay? If they're too de-emphasized, I go the other way, almost to the point of being ridiculous, and make them really powerful. I like to take about 2% off. I don't like to do anything too aggressive. This is the adjustment parameters, and this is the midtone slider, adjust the density of the stars, okay? If I hit checkbox, this script will finish, and lo and behold, we have, ladies and gentlemen, a finished, really, really beautiful deep sky image, complete
Get
with
outta here.
stars.
Gee.
Okay, that does not take us very long. Have I worked on images that took me 8 hours? Yes, but this one you can do in 10, 15 minutes.
Wow.
Because we did it.
Down and install all the scripts, or do they come with the program?
It's a mix. The newest ones, you get some scripts from the PixInsight folks when you buy the program. But the ones that are very visual, like I just showed you, they almost all arrived in the last 6 months, and they're from various different people who use this stuff and decided that, I want something that's better. I want it more Photoshop-like.
Are you on a forum or something, maybe Cloudy Nights, where you get all this up to date?
Yeah, PixInsight has a forum. So you can get all the scripts there. The way you do it in PixInsight is called repositories. And the authors of these scripts will put the repositories in their links. And you copy the link and put it into the repository in PixInsight. You do an update, and then they all appear. It's really simple, and they're free. They don't cost anything.
Worth mentioning also the SETI Astro stuff that came.
Awesome.
There's something called SETI Astro Suite, which is free.
Yep.
It's a combination of all those tools together, and you don't need PixInsight at all for them. They work standalone or with Ciro or any of the other free software packages as well. And SETI Astro Suite updates about every week.
Okay.
And like I say, it's free and you can really do a huge amount of this stuff without PixInsight if you don't want to spend the
Yeah.
$300.
So anybody see anything really crazy, hard to figure out that I just did up there? It looked all doable, not too wild. All right, my goal in this whole presentation was to get you to believe that.
It's just a good thing that this is being recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So yeah.
Speaking of dark frame, did
Yep.
you say the dark frame for one particular object or for
No.
any object?
You save it for that camera. And it's good for about 90 days. Some are better than others. As your sensor ages, I find I have to replace the dark frames more frequently. It changes more frequently. Yes. You can keep a library of dark frames. Flats you got to do every time you shoot. There's no way around that one because the dust, you don't know where the dust is going to be located. Okay. My whole point of this presentation wasn't to train you in doing this because I don't think anybody will remember anything that I just did. But my point I hope you go home with is that you can do this. This is not an impossibility, okay? And the reason that I confidently can say that I know you guys can do it is that this is a picture of my brain. And it is not normal, okay? You guys are some of the smarter people I've run into. You all have normal brains. You can do this. So I know it's possible, all right? If you want to continue to learn, YouTube, great resource. Trevor Jones, I told you about. Nico Carver has a channel named Nebula Photos. He's an expert high-end photographer, but he specializes in beginners. He's got great instruction. Sean Nielsen is another Canadian guy. His channel is called Visible Dark. He specializes in PixInsight instruction. Really, really good stuff. Adam Block Studios. Adam Block is an incredible imager and an expert processor. If I had to pick one guy on the planet Earth who's the best processor I know, it's Adam Block. He has achieved 101 NASA APODs. Okay, I don't have one yet.
It doesn't hurt that he's in a professional observary on Mount
It does
Lebanon.
not hurt. Yeah, he's got some advantages clearly, but he didn't screw him up either. He's an amazing imager. Adam puts out a video series called it's Adam Block Studio series, and it's a paid subscription. It's not particularly inexpensive. I think his intro package is about $60. I have bought all his stuff. I have watched all his videos 3 or 4 times because generally I fall asleep the first 2 or 3. He can be a little monotone, but the information is there. There's nobody better for instruction on this. I will try to help you guys any way I can. I found I love to teach, and in fact I'm looking for 1 or 2 people that would like to work with me directly. I have PixInsight now on this very expensive, fast laptop I just bought, and I have it on my desktop computer. So I can work with a couple of people at a time if you'd like to, you get stuck someplace, you've started, you're stuck. I can help you get through that, I hope. Or if you're just looking to get started, I'll work with you as well, okay? That being said, this was the easy part of it. The hard part is now upon us, and we have to now make crazy balloon animals. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Ken, may I ask a question before you go?
Yes, absolutely.
I want to comment that it looks like the intelligent selection of file names is really important in making your work efficient.
It is. When you get the default names out of a stacking process in PixInsight, the name is about 8 miles long. And the first thing you do is rename all your files so they're short, succinct, and you can find them again.
The file name is short, but it describes exactly what you're looking